Good morning, brother Will.
Good morning, brother Rich. How you doing?
Good. I got this I don't know if I told you, I got this at the Culloden battlefield there in northern Scotland
Oh,
several
you didn't
months
mention
back.
that. That looks cool,
Yeah.
man.
Yep. That
Very
was a
cool.
little history lesson there.
Yeah,
You
and
just got done visiting battlefields, did you not?
I did, and history galore, including a stop by the Brown household for an evening where you and Miss Lisa were incredibly hospitable to us Yankees invading your
Mm.
territory yet again. And
Yet again. Yet again.
yet again, another war of northern aggression here.
I'll
The
take that kind of incursion anytime, brother.
yeah, we learned a lot, and at the end of the show, I've got a few thoughts. Um, I learned a few things from history, but what I really got, and it is what I find you get most from travel, is perspective.
Mm. I
So
look forward to
it's
that, man.
yeah, I got a few thoughts here at the end of the show, and maybe even a
Good.
suggestion. So
Ooh.
I'm losing part of my head here with this
Yeah, the green
background. So
screens.
yeah, what do we got
Who we
on
got
this
on
morning?
this morning?
Oh, great minds think alike. I see John Shriver's on from Yukon, Oklahoma. Coin number 1919. What's this coin number stuff?
You know, they got this little thing called the American Warrior Society. It's been around for about 10 years, and
Hmm.
it's what all the cool kids are doing. If you want to protect yourself and your family, look at that. Took a
Yeah,
hole through it. It's wild.
yeah. Well, that was how much my shooting improved after joining the American Warrior Society.
There we go. And, it's as you and I know, and everybody watching this morning, people like John and Alan and all those that were joining us today, they know it's not all about the gun, is it?
Hmm.
You got
You got that right. Yeah,
you got a
I
lot of
mean,
the other skills in there.
absolutely. You've got everything from BJJ, white belt to blue belt, medical. Most importantly, I think you'd agree with me, is the assessment. Find out where you're at,
Mhm.
and during that trip when we were gone for a week, I did get one opportunity to use some situational awareness in a parking lot, and turned out to be nothing. But I think it was a little interview for victimhood, and luckily I passed or failed, depending on how you want to look at that. But headed it off with a bottle of water.
Absolutely. Well done. Yeah. Will Rhodes is on, and so is our good friend Alan Kelly up there in occupied Virginia. Will, of course, is in Missouri. He's coin number 2269. Our good friend Ted down in Mississippi says, watching lots of threats. Yeah. Good morning to all those who take responsibility. Listen to that. I love
Yes,
that.
there you go. I like that. Yep. And that's what it is, taking responsibility for you and your family. And that's why a couple of self defense guys talk about this news and economic stuff. First, Rich helps keep me employed with this, um, as it pays the bills around here, you know. But also, this is part of what we have to be ready for. This is, the same way we look at, say, like the election and what President Harris might mean for the country and what a President Trump could mean for the country and or how we support our families. Well, it's the same thing knowing what's coming in the economy. Because the more I've learned about this stuff, and I think you'd probably agree with me with me on this, Rich, that the president has relatively little to do with this stuff. There's bigger forces at play. By that I mean monetary forces, not some behind the scenes tinfoil hat stuff here. Monetary forces, demographic forces at play.
Yeah.
And the political folks react to that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And no need to adjust your screens this morning. That is correct. We are wearing the new AWS
Yes.
hoodies. I don't want to mess my hair up,
Yeah. Yep. Oh, look at you go.
but if you
Man.
want to check them out, I got links in today's show notes to get all your AWS swag. We made it real
Mm-hmm.
simple. Got a black hoodie or these real cool gray and camouflage ones, and then we just got solid black classic T-shirts. So check it
Yep.
out. Dr. Gordon Botton
Cool
is on
stuff.
from Ohio. Good morning, sir.
Good to see you, sir. So, all right, let's dig right in here, huh, brother? So
Let's do it.
we start with our standard fear and greed index from CNN Business. We're at 35. That was down to about 22 at one point, maybe 10 days ago ish. Um, it's been coming back up. Who knows what the future brings, of course. But to that point, um, uh, let's take a. Hey, Tony's on. Good morning, Tony.
As
This
well.
is
Good
the.
morning.
Well, so this is from the St. Louis Fed federal surplus or deficit. We know which side of that chart is reality. This goes from about 1900 to, I don't know, pretty much present day. And we can see There's a little bit of a deficit there. Look at that little tiny deficit that was World War II, Rich. Wouldn't we like to go back to that?
Just a tiny little sliver.
Yeah, just a little fella right there. And then we can see where it really started to take off in about 74-ish,
Mhm.
which wasn't too long after August 15th of 1971, which would have been, of course, when Nixon took us off the gold standard.
Yeah.
And
That's a
that
little
was when
surprise.
that's when they took the brakes off the money printing, and we can see where that has led ever since. The trend is your friend, as we like to say, and we can certainly see where this trend is at now. Ever since the .com bubble burst in '99, and we can see which way this has been going ever since. So this is going to tie in with some stuff later on we're going to talk about, because these budget deficits are going to start driving a lot of decision making in DC, and we know how they feel about not spending money. So that starts to limit things down, because basically they can limit how much they spend, they can tax us more, or they can print more. And the most painless of those is, of course, what they always run to, which is printing more. And then we have to deal with the consequences of that. And for a long time, we didn't have to. We got away with it because we exported our inflation to China. And I just saw an article this morning that for the second year in a row, their population declined. No, seventh year in a row. I'm going to mess this up. Seventh year in a row, their population declined, I believe it was. Second year in a row, deaths outnumbered births.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah. And they're having youth unemployment is very high over there right now. But in the past, after China joined the WTO in '94, we were able to export our inflation. And by that, I mean the excess money that was rolling around in the system here, instead of being contained to the United States and causing inflation, that money went over to China in the form of trade deficits. Well, that exported our inflation. That's why their economy inflated. Well, we saw the proof of that was what had happened post-COVID, when China was still shut down, but everybody else was opened up. All of a sudden, that money got contained here within the United States, the Western world, if you will, and we got a bunch of inflation. So now we've got the proof. The proof usually comes later, and for a long time, people theorized that that's what was happening as we were exporting inflation. Well, we got the proof when we couldn't export it anymore. So. Yeah. We'll see what happens. I think
did we do that after World War I, Will, or was it after World War II? I think it was after World War I.
What was it? Was it you're referring to?
Offshored our inflation.
Well, Now, after World War II, we had the largest working age population, so I think that's a part of what fueled the economic engine of the 50s and 60s, was because then if the world needed anything built, for sure, say in the next 5 years after World War II ended, it pretty much had to be done here.
Yeah, everything else was destroyed.
You weren't doing it in Europe because it was destroyed, right? Like you just said. Yeah. So I think it was kind of the opposite then. That helped inflate our economy. I never thought about it like that, but that's a darn good point.
Yeah. Jeff is good morning, brother. I will be flying out to go see my baby brother down in Key West tomorrow. Really looking forward to it.
Awesome.
So yeah, more fear in the market. No surprise there.
Yeah. So Americans are still shopping. They're just going to Walmart. And I found this article of interest because in the past, we've talked about people shopping up and shopping down as the economy varies, right? So people who did shop at Target are shopping down to Walmart. And we're also seeing some other stuff here. You want to read off that top part for us, brother?
Absolutely. As customers have scoffed at $6 iced coffee at Starbucks, $15 Big Mac meals at McDonald's, and other items, they're buying groceries, household essentials, and other products at Walmart because they feel they are getting good value for their money.
When was the last time people worried about good value for their money, huh?
Been a while. Been a minute.
Yep, been a while. But and I see Pat Cahill's on from northern Wisconsin. Welcome to my fellow Cheesehead.
Good to have you, brother.
And it goes on here to say Walmart said its overall prices at its stores and Sam's Club were down slightly from a year prior. That's what we call deflation, right, brother? So it has also temporarily dropped prices known as rollbacks on 7,200 select items. And here's the key: Walmart is not the only retailer cutting prices. Target, Walgreens, and other chains are slashing prices too. These retailers are cutting prices to draw back customers. So the consumer is pulling back. And McDonald's, their earnings call was full of indicators of that. Same for Starbucks. People are squeezed, and it takes a long time to get there. And then once they feel that way, it takes a long time to change it back. So this is not going to be a quick snapback.
No, it's a psychology.
Absolutely. And, once you've been hungry, and both if a person is literally hungry, but also just struggling, I mean by that, once a person has struggled, it's really hard to get rid of that. It stays with them the rest of their lives. So hopefully it doesn't get that bad that people are able to get over it relatively soon. But even we look back at the 70s with the inflation, it took a long time, it took a decade for people to get rid of that. Generational change, if you will.
Again, our grandparents, and those that are watching this morning, probably about our age, the grandparents were children in the Depression. And guess what? They were that way forever. Yes. They never stopped being frugal.
Exactly.
What do you think about Alan Kelly's comment here?
You go out to eat any decent restaurant, it costs a minimum $50 for a couple. Well, after a week on the road with myself, my bride, and 2 of our children, yeah, you're right. Every time we stop for anything, I mean, even a quick meal somewhere for lunch, it was $75-$80 minimum.
Yeah,
and that was a quick. That wasn't, what's that?
Yeah, no, I was just that. It's so timely that Alan says that, because last night we were having dinner with our youngest daughter and her husband, and he was kind of like, me and Maggie went to Christie's Pub Grub, and it was $65 for us to eat. I mean, that's throwing in a 15-20% tip out the door. So, yeah, and the tip culture in America's out of freaking control, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yep. And and we went out for one decent meal. We were in Greenville, Tennessee, and it was a nice barbecue place, and even had dessert, which normally I don't do, even though I love my cheesecake. And it was, I think we were $140 out the door for 4 of us, and that was with no drinks, just water.
Yeah, and that's what they said too. Like, this is water, because I'm like, oh, okay, well. So yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets worse. And I love this thing here at the bottom here.
Okay.
Lower prices equals deflation, equals lower profits, lower wages, and then job cuts. So don't herald in the sign of, oh God, thank goodness it's from deflation, a little bit of respite. No, there's a trickle down here, folks, that is not good for anybody.
There is. And your trickle down comment is point on, because people see the immediate benefit of lower prices because their wages haven't changed yet, right?
Right.
And then it takes months for this whole equation to work out. And then I think for the most part, society doesn't really put those two things together, right? And so we celebrate as a society, we celebrate prices going down. And there's times we should, whatever, a 60-inch TV doesn't cost what it once did. That's deflation. But that's a deflation through better productivity, better technology. Exactly right. What we're talking about here is sustained lower prices across the board, not just in one sector. And that's what we're seeing here. And I think if we go to the next slide, my memory is what it once was. Actually, maybe it didn't make it in here. Let me take a quick peek here. I'm gonna cheat. We may skip ahead here. Hang on, bear with me, guys. The joys of a live show, right? Yeah, jump forward one more slide.
Okay. You mean read this one?
Yeah, go for it, brother.
Home Depot sales at stores open at least a year dropped 3.6% last quarter. The company said Tuesday it expects sales at stores open at least 12 months to fall between 3% and 4% this year compared to last year. That's down from its earlier estimate that sales would fall about 1% by that measure.
And we've got the note down there that these are nominal, not real numbers. So in other words, these are not adjusted for inflation. So when they look at we'll say a 3.5% decrease in sales, well, just to keep up with inflation, they should raise prices by 3.5%. So that's a 7% swing. And this is after they had to start paying people, $87 an hour to show up and say, welcome to Home Depot. Right.
Right.
So these companies are going to start getting squeezed. I see Johnny King is on. Good morning, sir.
Hey, morning, Johnny.
So this is going to start squeezing these places. Now, they can't, in my opinion, they can't start with wage cuts, because if they cut people's wages, even though the jobs aren't as plentiful as they once were, people still have in their heads they can go get another job, right? And I didn't put the chart in because I wanted to try and keep it under 50 slides again this morning. The wages aren't going down if you look at hourly wages, but what is going down is hours worked per week.
Oh yeah.
And so there, and people right now see, it's just a temporary blip. I'm still making my whatever, $22, $24 an hour, whatever it is. And I got a little more free time. Well, when you look at a deal like this with Home Depot, now if we go back to the previous slide, I can tie these in together.
Okay.
All right. So free rent and free parking. Landlords are throwing in sweeteners. You want to read that top part for us, brother?
Sure. The share of rental listings on Zillow offering a concession as an incentive to rent climbed to 33.2% in July. That's flat from June, but up from 25.4% a year earlier and well above the recent low of 19.4% 2 years ago, according to Zillow. Deals are especially popular in 6 major metro areas where more than half of the rental listings on Zillow are offering sweeteners. That's Raleigh, Charlotte, Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Nash, Vegas, and Austin.
Yep. And so the way I'm thinking these are going to tie together, you look at Home Depot. Home Depot is people renovating their homes, right? And during their earnings call, the CEO said, yes, we're seeing a marked decrease in large ticket orders. In other words, people calling up and saying, I need $2,500 worth of all this, deliver it, or just put it on one bill and I'll swing by with my truck and trailer and pick it up. So they're seeing a marked decrease in that. So people aren't taking on big projects. They're doing more of the I got to fix the sink sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So they're seeing that. Now, if someone rents, you're going to take whatever furniture you have and move it into the apartment or the rental house, right? People typically, when they move into a rental, they don't get excited like when they buy a home, right? So this affects durable goods, fridge, freezer, washer, dryer. The durable good is something expected to last longer than 5 years, although we could debate that with current day refrigerators compared to the avocado green ones from the 70s terrible. That will outlast cockroaches and nuclear war. So that durable goods things that will play through to your Samsung, Maytag, the makers of those things, right? And Home Depot sells those things as well. The other side of this is your furniture makers. And we've seen that in some past shows. We've pointed out some furniture makers that are shutting down and laying people off because we're seeing a marked decrease in furniture sales. So now you couple that with landlords throwing in free rent because during the COVID era, the multifamily home permitting process started back in 20 and 21. Well, by the time they permit it, get the project started, get it done, and get it on the market, it's about now. And this is what we're seeing now, is that we're going from a shortage of rentals to now a glut of rentals. So this will play through to the single family home market, because now you've got, in some areas, I'm reading reports that rents are cheaper than owning, significantly cheaper, like 20, 25% cheaper to rent than own. Plus, you don't have to come up with a down payment or take the risk of property values dropping. You just take your sure thing and it's cheaper month to month, right? This, at the same time, people are not going to Starbucks and McDonald's because their budgets are stressed. So if a person's budget is stressed to the point that they're not going to things that have in the past considered staples like a Starbucks, well, are they going to look at the long term? Well, I want to buy a home and start building equity over time. And yeah, there may be ups and downs, but over time, we know the housing market goes up. Are they thinking like that? Or are they thinking, hey, I can save $400 a month and we'll, it's a 1 year lease. We'll sit and see what happens. Let's get back on our feet a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm tying all that in together in my mind. Now we'll see how it plays out. But there's even more multifamily coming on the market at this point. And if the Biden administration gets their wish and makes it illegal for essentially Wall Street firms to own more than 50 single family homes, and I can't remember, there's a criteria for geography with that. And they're forced to divest themselves of holdings that meet whatever that criteria is. That's going to push a bunch of single family homes onto the market as well. Because right now they've purchased those to rent them out.
Well, so, I wanted to talk about something that the Harris Waltz campaign dropped last night, and I'm going to read straight off their Facebook page. Kamala Harris planned to lower costs, would provide first-time home buyers with a $25,000 down payment. Have you seen this?
No, I have not.
Yes. It came out 21 hours ago. So part of her plan to lower costs, it's in her proposal. One of the things is it's going to lower costs for everybody by giving you a handout for a first-time home buyer, $25,000 freaking dollars of taxpayer money. How does that lower cost for everybody long term there, Brother Will?
It doesn't, and I'll tell you exactly what I would do if I was looking to sell a place. I would get an offer from Rich and Lisa Brown.
Mm-hmm. You can't make this up, man.
Did she say, was that American dollars or was that pesos?
It's not a joke. It's crazy.
Yeah. So here's what I do. If I got an offer from Rich and Lisa Brown to purchase a home I had up for sale, the first thing I would do is Facebook stalk them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they looked young, I would, and I could make the assumption they were first-time home buyers. That would change how I negotiate that deal.
Yeah,
because I know they're going to
raise $25,000
for free, right? And we know social media nowadays, especially younger folks, are going to be all over it, right? And they're going to have what year they graduated high school. And in fairness, I think I've got that on mine as well. But I could put together that, they're, 25, 26, whatever the age might be. And maybe even look at some pictures from wherever they're living. Oh, look, they see this appears to be their home, and it's an apartment complex.
Mm-hmm.
I put all that together and I negotiate a little tougher versus somebody maybe our age who comes in and throws an offer at me, and I can probably make the assumption that they're not a first-time home buyer. So all it's going to do is keep prices higher, across the board. So so you're not making anything cheaper, just making people feel good about it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you should read the comments. This is an IQ test, and most people in the comments are feeling it. It's unbelievable, folks. Will Parker, our good friend out there in beautiful Montana, is on. So glad to have you on, sir. Thank you to the 16 folks watching us live, watching the dumpster fire that is the end of the American empire, brother.
Yes, absolutely. So we touched on that Home Depot part there.
Mm-hmm.
So Japan's economy bounces back, supporting case for more rate hikes. So this bounce back supports the BOJ, Bank of Japan's, that's their Federal Reserve, and bodes well for further rate hikes. Although the central bank would remain cautious, as the last rate increase had caused a sharp spike in the yen. So let's dig into this a little bit. First, let's say good morning to Jerry. Good to see you, sir. Glad you got a notification.
Yeah, right down the road in Knox Vegas. He's coin number 197, one of the old G's. Good to have you on, Jerry.
All right, awesome. So let's talk about this. We know the stock market went down a whole bunch. It would have been the week before last, Thursday, Friday, and Monday. Went down about 10% in 3 days. And it came out of this carry trade note I've got down here. You familiar with the carry trade, brother?
No.
Okay, so carry trade.
I've heard of it, but I have no idea. I couldn't explain it to a child or anything.
Okay. So the carry trade, so let's say you've got two currencies. Let's just call them the US dollar and the Japanese yen. Just make that up. Okay.
Okay.
Now, yen is cheap. And by that, I mean their interest rates have been 0 since about 1984. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go borrow yen, it's going to be very inexpensive to do so because it's going to cost me next to nothing in interest payments. So I've got very little cost associated with that trade, right? Or that borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
So now I go borrow that money, and I'm going to use round numbers here, 0%. And let's say I'm going to play it safe. I take that yen, I convert it back into US dollars, and then I go buy treasury bonds paying 5%.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
Now you
mm.
think, well, I got $20,000 to go through with this. 5% a year on that, not much. When the numbers start with B's, like billions, all of a sudden now you're talking real money
Yeah.
with no risk. Unless suddenly that cost of borrowing goes up. Now it squeezes that. Now let's say it goes to 3% borrowing cost and 5%. You're making 5%. Well, you're still making a 2% spread. That'll still take care of mama and the kids, right? When you're talking about
Mhm.
that kind of money, but it's a squeeze. Now, I'm sure some intrepid fellow would look at that and go, hey, how about if I borrow at zero and go buy Nvidia stock? Yeah, that's going up big time, right?
Mhm.
Well, this is exactly what happened over time because Wall Street, humans, greed. Hey, we did this and it worked. Let's do it some more. And they keep doing it until it doesn't work. Well, this is what happened to the stock market. Japanese economy starts recovering. The Bank of Japan starts raising rates. Those cost of those loans go up. Those are very short-term loans, guys. And all of a sudden, the Nvidia stock goes down a little bit. And Nvidia has been the darling for doing this on Wall Street with the hedge funds. So
Mhm.
then Nvidia stock goes down. And oh, by the way, they also bought it on margin. So now they're getting margin called. Okay. So margin means they borrowed the money. So they took the dollars they had, say they had $2 billion to put in there. They borrowed another $2 billion and bought Nvidia stock with all of it. Now all of a sudden Nvidia goes down 10, 15%, whatever it went down. They get a margin call. So now they have to come up with enough money to make that happen. Now that money can come from anywhere, but the easiest way to get it is just sell your Nvidia stock.
Right.
Well, that more selling drives prices lower, right? Starting to see a problem here.
Yeah. It's like a
This is
self-lifting ice cream cone there.
exactly right. And this is exactly what happened. And so that's when the Bank of Japan came out and they said, we will no longer raise rates during times of market volatility. That was code for we understand what we did and the downline consequences of it.
Right.
And so they made it clear they would not do that. Also, if a person were to pull up a chart of FXY, Foxtrot X-ray Yankee, that is the ETF that is the Japanese yen. And that was up, I don't know, 15% in just a few weeks. It was a great
Mhm.
trade. And that trades versus the US dollar. And that was when the BOJ started raising their rates. Now they've made it clear they're going to raise rates some more, but they will do it only when the market is not volatile. So that's the warning. You guys better get out of this trade. Now, all of a sudden, when people start selling all this yen, what's that going to do to the value of the yen? It's going to drive it down. So this is all intertwined like a big spider web.
I tell you what, man, it is not looking good. I just pulled that up. FXY
Uh-huh.
on the 5 year, it's down 30%.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Jeez.
The let me pull my
Year
chart
to
up
date,
here.
it's down almost 2, and I'm sorry, over the last year to date, it's down almost 5%.
Yep. Now the oh my gosh, here we go. Sorry, trying to get my
While you're looking that up,
trying to get this
Chad Ray
so
is on from the Veterans Administration waiting room. Good morning, and I love what Johnny King said in regards to that $25,000 Kamala Harris deal. He says that's like
uh-huh.
cutting a foot of material off the top of the blanket and sewing it to the bottom to make it longer.
Exactly right.
He gets it.
So I'm looking at this FXY trade we're talking about. So from the 10th of July to the 5th of August, so 3 weeks,
Mhm.
the yen went up to call it 12.5% compared to the US dollar. And that's what
Mhm.
triggered all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So you're right. Longer term, the yen's been going down because they've been printing it like crazy because they've been desperate to create some inflation in Japan.
Mhm.
But eventually now they're starting to get some inflation over there. So now they have to start tightening things up a little bit. And then you're gonna get these violent spikes like this. So and this happens all over the world. it's a multinational investment landscape we live in now, and something that the Bank of Japan does affect your 401k.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, it came back.
This Keynesian economic theory, that the government can just pull levers and just, either get us into or out of these problems, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It works great when you start from a baseline like we had in the 60s and the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Even the early 80s, where you start with a high rate environment, and then for decades they can pull those levers to make that happen. But we had to go through the pain of the late 60s all the way up to 1980, 82, even with the recession then, to get into a position where they could do that. And everybody likes the 80s because it was better music. Everybody likes from the 80s on, but nobody likes to think about 68 to 82, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all fun and games for Gen Xers like us because we came of age as things started getting better, right?
Yes, we did.
Nobody wants to play that other part, right? But Jerome Powell's even come out and said we may need to go through a period of below target growth so that we can basically set up the situation we had to start in 82. What he's talking about is we may have to go through a period of slow growth, maybe even stagflation, to get back to the point where we can run again for that long. And there's other dynamics there too. Now people expect more out of the government as far as programs and spending. And we didn't start with that in 82, 84, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can we do that again? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a happy time. There's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to get what they expect out of the government.
And the problem I have with all this stuff is Keynesian is always good short term.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why our economy or our system probably favors it, because we can make our economy dance right before an election or whatever we need it to do by tugging on a few levers. But for long-term sustainable growth, that was it the Austrian model or just straight up classic economics. Let the markets do what they need to do.
Yep.
And, there's no wonder why our economy favors that approach of government intervention.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the politicians, if you wait for the Austrian school or just regular economy market forces, if you will, to take care of things, is nobody can take credit for it, right?
Oh, exactly. Great point.
So,
wow.
So if nobody can take credit for it, we can't have that. It's gotta work good for somebody, right? So what's Will Parker say? I think it's really good.
He says, how many people would take advantage of the $25,000 to buy a second or third home under their spouse's name? Yeah, this is
an idea. I'm going to look at that.
That's a damn great idea. My wife has never gone out and just bought a home. Well, Lisa, guess what you're going to do?
Or in my case, I've got 3 kids.
Exactly.
Right there. Exactly right. This is exactly what Boston said. Yeah. Boom. First time home buyer. Don't worry, kid. I'll backstop you.
Exactly.
I mean, I've got 2 going off to college, and I'm looking at, do I buy a rental house each one of those places, let them rent it out to their friends, rooms, college kids doing their thing, 2 people to a room or whatever, and then keep it for the 4 years and maybe even keep it after that, but at least keep it for the 4 years and let somebody else pay for it during that period of time.
Will says, give the lazy a taste of socialism.
Absolutely.
Where is this money coming from? Nobody, that's Obama's stash. I remember people saying that, so Obama money.
It's Obama money. Yeah.
Gosh,
I'd forgotten about that. Yes, I remember that interview. Yeah. Oh, gosh, I'd forgotten about that.
I don't have to pay my mortgage anymore. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, God.
Somebody's paying it. That's for sure.
Oh, somebody's paying it. All right.
Yep. And to that, who's paying it? Here's who's paying it right here.
Exactly.
And we're paying the price, right? So I'm down to eating ramen. Social Security benefits are keeping up with inflation. You want to read this one off for us, brother?
Sure, man. Social Security benefits have risen by 58% between 2010 and 2024, but the cost of goods and services purchased by typical retirees jumped 73% during that time, the league said. The price of bread and ground beef, for instance, have shot up nearly 147% and 73% respectively over that period. And yeah, who was that I was having this conversation with the other day? Because they like, well, according to the CPI, or it's only this, and I'm like, hey, that's a fugazi, that's a wazi, that's a
Mhm.
woozy. If you're constantly pulling in
Right.
stuff in that basket and changing around anytime you want.
Yep.
But when you start looking at real numbers like that, just this relative to that over these time periods, you learn something a whole different, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And other parts of this article, if you guys want to look this up, I felt sorry for this lady. She hasn't had a haircut in over a year. Couldn't remember the last time she ate beef because it's too expensive. These are the people that are paying the price for this largesse in other places
Mhm.
because Clinton was hailed as a hero because he indexed Social Security payments to inflation. Before that, Congress just decided each year. Well, he
Mhm.
indexed it to inflation, but of course they doctored the inflation numbers for the second time at that point. So, it's these are the people who are on these fixed incomes are paying the price for these cumulative rate of returns on inflation. Like you say, it's 3% now, but that's 3% on a higher number.
I forget who I was listening to. Maybe it was Peter Thiel on Joe
Hmm.
Rogan recently. Have you heard that episode?
I haven't, but I've got it. I've got it downloaded. I want to listen to that.
Yeah, I'm only about an hour in. It's like 3 hours, and he was saying that we really screwed up when the psychology behind Social Security is what he was saying is wrong. Right now, the psychology is that it's some sort of a quasi-retirement program that
Hmm.
they take the money from you, put it aside, and it's going to be yours someday. He goes, but really, it's more of a welfare thing, and we need to get that in people's heads, and we need to start means testing for it. And I'm like, again, it's social. That is just out and out social. You're stealing
Hmm.
from me
Hmm.
and stealing from my employer because he
Hmm.
has to match me,
Yep.
and then you're going to give it to somebody who's sitting on their ass.
Yep.
And you know what I could have done with that money on the market or for my family? I mean,
Yeah.
uh, when they start means testing Social Security, man, that's another one of those big giant canaries in the coal mine.
Yeah. I
That
agree.
is
And
coming. It's
yep,
coming.
it is coming. I agree. And it is a big canary. And the the other part of this too is, this is a reason not to depend on the government. This article is a reason not to depend on the government to handle these things because their Social Security payments haven't gone up. They went by 58%. So if you compare that to the ground beef, it went up essentially a third, right?
Hmm.
And but yet everybody still pays in 6.2%, right?
Yeah.
6.2% for employee and employer up to whatever the max dollar amount is for that. And they want to raise taxes everywhere else. And I'm not suggesting this, so anybody in DC who might be listening to this is not a suggestion. Why hasn't that been raised? Right?
That's Peter Thiel talks about that, and he
Does
says
he?
it should be.
I mean,
So right
on a
now,
numbers basis, he's right.
yeah, but
But
right now,
yeah,
if it's going to be a welfare program, then yeah, because
yeah,
his point is, and I want to say he said, and I don't know, but I want to say he said it's like 150,000. It's capped. So if you make above that, it doesn't raise
mhm,
it up to be
yep,
6.2% or whatever it is of your $2 million salary.
correct. And
Uh,
so it's 6.2% on each side up to it's right around that 150 area and then nothing above that. One of the things the Biden administration has proposed is making a donut hole in that. So from 150 to I think it was 400, there'd be nothing, and then above 400 it kicks in again. And Ted
mhm,
says the 2024 cap is $168,000. Above that, you
mhm,
don't pay your 6.2. The employer doesn't pay in either, if I remember correctly.
exactly.
But then what Biden's proposing is the 400 at above 400, it would kick back in again. Well, of course, what they didn't do is they didn't adjust that. Um, 400,000 isn't adjusted for inflation. That's a set number. And that
Mhm,
168 that is this year, 168, that does adjust for inflation. So that goes up every year. So essentially it'll go away over time. And it'll
mm.
just be everything pays in 6.2. So the devil, of course, is always in the details. So yeah. So this is, and let's remember the full name of Social Security has another S in it. And it's at the beginning. It's supplemental Social Security.
Yeah, good
It was
point.
never meant to be a retirement program. It was supposed to supplement what a person had saved up when they retire. And of course, there's the age factor of that too. When the program initially came out, the age was basically the median life expectancy at the time.
Right,
And
exactly.
the idea
So you were
was that if you made
banging
it,
and never going to
yeah,
get it anyway.
exactly. So the idea was that if a person lived that long, and then even longer, they probably weren't in a position to work physically.
Mhm.
And of course, that number was never adjusted. And of course, they tried to adjust it. Now we've seen what happened most recently in France when they tried to adjust the retirement age. There was
Greece,
protests on the
same thing.
streets. Yes.
Burn the place to
Yep.
the ground.
Yeah. Exactly. So, yeah. So
But yeah,
it's another corner we're backed into, unfortunately.
it is. Let's get some comments here. Dr. Gordon Botson says, I'm listening to that Peter Thiel podcast now. Scary stuff. Yeah. Jeff says Joe Biden is a Mount Rushmore kind of president. My sides are
boy.
hurting on that one. I
Oh
heard
my
Nancy
gosh.
Pelosi say
Yeah.
that. I'm like, you lost your freaking mind.
Yeah. Well, she's trying to make up for booting him out of the campaign.
Exactly. Make yourself feel better about what you did. But even was it the New York Times op-ed piece said it was a coup?
Yes. Yep.
There
I
you
saw that, and it was like, oh boy, if that's in the New York Times. Wow.
Yeah. There's
And
nothing
especially
else
their
to
opinion
call it.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. All right. So we're gonna go a little far afield here, brother.
Oh.
So the first two here, we're just gonna so we're all dealing with the same terms here. When you hear monetary policy, it's the Federal Reserve they're talking about. The policies of the Federal Reserve, money system, Federal Reserve, monetary policy. Fiscal policy is the federal government spending / programs. Okay. So the Federal Reserve has been tightening throughout all this, and I've been trying to wrap my head around this because the Federal Reserve has been tightening ever since what 21, 22, whenever they started tightening it, and they're using quantitative tightening. So they've raised interest rates, and they're pulling money out of the system, right? So, but the federal government has been loosening, and I say that with air quotes because they've been deficit spending like crazy, and that keeps inflation higher because there's more money rolling around the system. And the reason that has worked is because people still want to buy our debt, our national debt, our treasury bills, treasury notes. Yes. So you've got, in the past, the Fed and Congress would work together. They work in concert to, and I'll say, manage or manipulate the economy because that's what they do, right? But this is the only time I can think of in history where they're working against one another. Okay. And it's like, okay, so I get it. The politicians want to keep spending money because they want to get reelected. And the Federal Reserve is trying to take care of their mandates of low inflation and stable employment, right? So they're, at appearances here, they're working against each other. And then the question was, or are they? I mean, these people all know each other. Janet Yellen, who's the Treasury Secretary, used to be chairman of the Fed, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Next slide.
Okay.
It's time to break out some special headgear.
Oh, look at this.
It's back, baby. Oh my gosh, this is terrible.
I love it.
I get rid of this background, but I got a bunch of drywall right behind me. So I got the tinfoil hat back out. Oh my gosh, there we go. There we go. You can see I got to adjust the antennas here. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. That looks terrible with that background. I got to figure out a better deal there, guys. Okay.
Oh, we got to figure something out because I love the headgear.
Yeah. So, all right. So, go to the next chart there, brother.
Okay.
All right. So, bear with me because I was thinking about this a lot yesterday and really on the drive home. We put 2,500 miles on the truck in 10 days. So, 9 days, I think it wound up being. So, I had a lot of time to sit and think. Okay. So the chart we started with all the way back on page 1, this is that same chart. This is your federal surplus or deficit as a percentage of gross domestic product. The first chart was just in millions of dollars. Okay. So this is a percentage of GDP. Okay. And you can see our big dip down that was World War II in the 40s, right? And we can see it basically underneath that line the entire history of the country. There was that anomaly in the late 90s when oil was $15 a barrel and the dot-com boom was coming on. There was money rolling around everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we can see the trend since about 98 is only going one direction. And I would argue it's accelerating that way. Okay.
Okay.
So why, like right now, if we look at the far right of that chart and you look at where our deficit spending is right now, and my angled red line there covered it up, but the very last part of that blue line actually is trending back down, meaning more deficits right now after that spike up. So that red horizontal line across there is the current level of deficit spending as a percentage of gross domestic product. You take that all the way back across, and you can either include or exclude COVID as you desire. But the only time we've had a greater degree of deficit spending was World War II. But this is the best economy ever, brother.
No, probably not.
And Biden needs to be on Mount Rushmore. So this deficit spending is countering what Jerome Powell, J-Dog, is doing, right? So who always ask, quo bono, who benefits? So who benefits right now is the politicians, right? Because the D's right now can be like, hey, tout the economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Republicans can go, yeah, but look at the deficit spending, right? So, but who suffers the consequences of this are wage earners through inflation. All the stuff we just looked at through all these other charts here today, right? And all these articles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go, if you can go take us all the way back to slide one for a second. Remember this chart here, guys, how it's going sideways, right? If you can take us all the way back to slide one, let's look at that chart.
Okay.
This one looks like it's dropping off a cliff, or in this case,
Yes.
increasing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is in millions of dollars. The other one is a percentage of the economy, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you can hide it. So let's just pretend for a moment somebody or a family is making $100,000 a year, and Ted brings up a great point: the July deficit. I just read something on Twitter about it last night, or X. 43 or 46% of July's federal government spending was borrowed money.
Yeah.
50% in a month of the spending.
We're what 120-ish% over our GDP.
Yep. Our national deficit is 120% of the GDP. Yep.
This is
unsustainable. Yep. So, all right. So, squirrel moment. Thanks. I appreciate the input, though, Ted. It's a great point. So, in that chart, the chart here where it's dollars, it's very dramatic, which is why politicians like to talk percentage of GDP. Because if we look at this and go, okay, let's say a family's making $100,000 a year, and their mortgage payments for the year, I'm going to make math easy on myself, is $10,000 a year. Okay, so 10% of their income is going to the mortgage payment. Okay, 10% of their gross income is going to the mortgage payment. Unrealistic, just keeping the math easy, guys. Now, let's say their income goes to $200,000, but they get a little better house. Now they got a $15,000 a year mortgage payment. Well, their cost went up by 50%, but as a percentage of their personal GDP, if you will, their total income, it went down. It went down to 7.5%. But their actual cost went up. And that's why you'll see the difference in these charts and how people will manipulate charts to make them show what they want. This is the chart the Republicans would show you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very dramatic and it shows all this loss and it's accurate. Okay. Now, if you go all the way to the last slide, this is the chart the Democrats would show you. Because they'll be like, well, see, it's trending the wrong way, but if people just get on board with paying more taxes and whatever their political talking points are, but it doesn't look nearly as dramatic, does it?
No.
So this is, what 90% of statistics are made up and the rest are lies, or whatever that saying is. So this is one way to look at this. So what I really want you guys to get out of this is, and this is where the tinfoil hat comes in, is I'm not sure they're working against each other. This dawned on me one morning. Are they really working against each other, or are they trying to prop up the economy on one side Well, J-Dog does this thing on the monetary side, running the national deficit up while at a higher interest rate right now, for sure. We're paying insane amounts of interest. It's more than the Department of Defense's budget. But when things turn through a recession, eventually it will happen. And J-Dog can take those rates down to zero. And when they go down a lot faster than they go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, let's just say interest rates go to a true zero. Well, now interest on the national debt is zero. Now, it's not entirely true because there's still bills out there paying 5%, but over time, the new stuff going out is at 0%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it got me to thinking, these people all know each other. They go to the same parties. Are they really going to work against each other? Because now I'm going to go a little political here, okay? Who's the one person that we know Yellen, Harris, Biden, Jerome Powell all really dislike?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Who don't they want back in office? Donald Trump. Hence the tinfoil hat earlier.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of ifs and could be's and who knows and in there. Now, who knows? But the one thing we know they do want is reelected, period, no matter who is on the other side. But it makes a person wonder, are they really working against each other? I mean, they all know each other.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, Powell was one of the Fed region presidents when Janet Yellen was Fed chairman. I'm sure they don't hate each other. I'm guessing that. I've never heard any rumors of that to that effect. They're really going to work against each other like that? Or are we watching the WWE? Right? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Well, as I'm looking at this insane deficit spending, I'm like, what are we spending it on? And, I'm looking at, like, as of September of 2023, the largest employer in the United States, if you thought maybe it's Walmart or maybe it's, I don't know, it's Apple or Google. No, it's the federal government with about 3 million employees.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look back into the 70s, the federal government wasn't even in the top 10, maybe not even the top 20. It was Exxon, General Motors, Ford, etc. So it's like, okay, well, this money that we're generating is doing what? It's got to pay for those 3 million employees you got. I don't know. It just
and their benefits, which are stellar, and their pensions and all the other associated costs with having employees.
Yeah. And Jeff brings up the point, says, with economists always predicting the future, do any of them have a plan for potential unrest post-election?
It won't happen in their neighborhood, so my guess is no.
Yeah, my guess is they don't. Martha's Vineyard is an island for a reason.
Exactly right. So, so this is, and this is part of the argument too for the from an economic standpoint for backing Ukraine as adamantly as the Biden administration has, because that started pumping money into the military industrial complex. So yeah, we're not sending our folks over there, but we're sending our stuff over there, and look what it's doing for the economy. Yeah. So there's an argument out there for that.
Which Lockheed, Raytheon, McDonnell Douglas, all those stocks are, when the U.S. stock market was going down, guess what those stocks were doing? Going up. To Jeff's point, though, if you guys did not see this, I think you should. So I'm going to show you this 47-second clip here. Bear with me. Sharing a screen is not always easy. But here we go. Let's see if this will work.
It's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody in civil war conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but simply do not want to do their job.
What he has just said there is worse than what any words that were ever said by Donald Trump at that rally. Is he going to be arrested? Is the FBI going to raid Raskin's home? Should be right now, because he just said that there's going to be a civil war, and that if Donald Trump wins the election, he will refuse to seat him. The language Raskin just used, this kind of language by Democrats, is made to scare people from voting for Donald Trump. He is threatening civil war. Yeah, it's pretty a terrifying comment.
Had you seen that comment?
I had not, no. And this is, you know, after our family trip was a Civil War trip. We went down by Chattanooga and we went to Shiloh and these things. And I don't think any reasonable person would ever lightly talk of Civil War. But I talk a lot less lightly of it now, talk more seriously in those terms now after seeing what happened back then. And, you know, I saw you got some slides coming up, but I'll publicly put it out there, and I'm not trying to blindside you, but I'd really like to do a show at some point, your perspective of the Civil War as a Southerner versus my perspective as a Northerner, because we're about the same age. And, you know, I will admit that in the past, there were times I was like, I need to get over it. Seriously. I mean, that because I'm born in Iowa, raised in Illinois, wound up in Wisconsin. Troops from these states went down there and fought, but it never touched these states. I can drive around anywhere and maybe there's a plaque somewhere, right? But I was really struck when we were on that trip throughout Tennessee. We drove from Shiloh to Corinth, 35-minute drive. And I noticed it before that, but we couldn't drive more than 5 minutes and not see, oh, this is the location of the trail that so-and-so's troops went down. This is this pot. This is that point. Anybody who lives specifically in Tennessee where we were, I'll just speak to that. There's no getting away from it. It's everywhere. And it really made me go, okay, this is part of it. I perceive this is part of the reason why it's still front and center, I guess I'll say, in your part of the country. Am I on track with that?
No, 100%. I mean, I was born at Fort Sanders Hospital. Fort Sanders is named after a fort during the Civil War. It occurred on November the 29th, 1863. I was born November the 29th, 1969, 106 years later. And it was, it was slaughtered. It was named after Colonel Sanders, not the chicken guy, but he was sniped on his way to Knoxville. It killed the commanding officer. But yeah, it's alive and well here. As a matter of fact, we were driving through downtown Crossville yesterday, and there's a giant plaque that has the names of all those killed in the Civil War. And it was literally hundreds of names on the Union side, hundreds of names on the Confederate side. I mean, it was almost 50-50. Yeah. And, if you have daughters and you have this marauding army coming through with little or no discipline, like I said before, in an apocalypse, you don't have daughters anymore. Their hair needs to look like mine, and you need to put them in dudes' clothing and just let them blend in, because you don't want that. If you look at what, and I don't want to go too far afield here, but Sherman, as his organized army came through, he had what they called the bummers on the flanks. And these are just former deserters, dirt bags, that opportunists that are raping and pillaging and using the cover of the army to do whatever psychotic shit they wanted to do to these people. So it's bad. Yeah. And, Jamie Raskin, this congressman I just showed from Maryland, he's no scrub, man. This guy went to Harvard Law School. I mean, he sits on all the powerful committees that you can imagine. The government accountability and oversight and all the good ones. So he's just not some low-level guy. And if you watch C-SPAN, you see him all the time because he's on all the major committees. So when he says stuff like that, you need to have a little antenna going up. He said the quiet part out loud on January the 6th. It's tough because we're going to disqualify him. He said, a collective we, the royal we.
Right. Yeah.
Meaning these conversations are being had, I would imagine, Will.
Oh, I'm sure they are. So, yeah, I'd be very interested in trying to put together a show like that in, some period of time here within the next couple of weeks.
I'd love to.
I think it'd be a very interesting take because, it really, how do I put this? Again, I guess the best way to put it is just gave me more perspective being down there and understanding why nobody down there gets over it, and that was, my thoughts on that were just from a, point of ignorance, because I don't live that.
Well, and it's, again, when I was a little kid, we used to go sometimes pick up my dad for lunch, and we'd get some hot dogs or sandwiches, and we'd go up to Fort Dickerson, and
Mhm.
it's where the cannons were that fired into Fort Sanders. So, and we'd sit up there and have our sandwich, but now looking back at it, and you can see where Fort Sanders ended. And a lot of people think the Civil War, man, because the pictures are black and white, that these people are somehow different than us. Man, what they had blimps that they got on the battlefield. They got guys up there with spotters, like, yeah, they're moving this way. I mean, they got telegraph machines and railways that are moving supplies around. You can't. That was as modern time as we could ever have. And if you look at the CSS Hunley, which is a submarine, the Confederacy started submarine warfare and sunk a ship, and these ironclad battleships for the first time ever started plying seas. This was as modern a war as you could imagine for that time. So just, again, don't think because you got this black mirror in your pocket that's going to save you if and when things go kinetic. It's not.
And I couldn't agree more. Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's put that show together.
I'm 100% on board.
Sounds good.
Let's talk about this here, man. I'm going to give you a couple slides on current events.
Okay.
As you may or may not know, the Ukrainians have pushed into Russia and are starting to take territory. Matter of fact, I think they're 30 kilometers inside of Russia right now, which is about 18 miles ish.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. And Ukrainian President Zelensky called Russian President Vladimir Putin's threat to use nuclear force should the West get involved in the war a bluff. And this was back in March 2022. So he called it, and he called Putin. He called Putin's bluff, and the West has gotten involved, and Putin didn't use nukes. Now, here's another quote that came out over the weekend. The Ukrainian incursion has called Putin's nuclear bluff and rightly damaged his reputation. So Putin keeps drawing these red lines, and Zelensky keeps stepping over them. And here's another quote that came out this weekend. The usual tactics of denial and obfuscation will not work this time, as the country finds itself occupied for the first time since the Second World War. And here's where I'm going with this, and it's an interesting segue back to our Civil War, because really this was such a strategic blunder for Lee to invade Pennsylvania at Gettysburg. Prior to that, he had kept the war in the South. He's maneuvering his armies very much like George Washington did during the Revolutionary War. He just had to keep an army on the field and keep maneuvering and keep bleeding England for year after year after year until they would finally be tired of it and sue for peace. He didn't need to necessarily invade anything or start launching ships over to land on the shores of the UK. That would have been a bad idea. But so here you go. Zelensky is doing that. And I hope that's not the error that it was for Lee go in. Only time will tell him that.
Yeah, do you think either or both of those, maybe the Lee one should wait for our Civil War show, but do you think some of this may come from an arrogance or overconfidence type position? Hey, we've had some success here. Let's push.
I think he's trying to use it as a bargaining chip in negotiations. Like you give me this territory back, I'll give you the Kursk back. But he's under 300 miles away from Moscow right now, and that's got to be scary. So you're getting kind of close.
And any idea off the top of your head what the range of the missile systems he has now are?
Our HIMARS that we've given him, no, I don't know that it's 300 miles. If somebody knows, please let me know, but I'm not sure. But the next thing he's doing is he's cutting bridges, and he's cutting all these strategic bridges that could be used by Russia to keep troops coming in. And of course, Will Parker says the U.S. funding the Ukrainian fight. Of course it is.
Yep.
And I'm going to come back to Ted's comment here because it's great. But I think the idea of a buffer zone by cutting bridges, maybe that's a signal that I'm stopping here, but I'm also not going to let you come in. Now I'm going to get my territory back, and I'll give you this back. So in that regard, brilliant move. We'll see how it plays out. What does Dr. Botson say?
He says that he saw an analysis of this, and they said that Kursk is not a strategically important place, and the Russians can bomb the crap out of them there. and I'm not familiar enough to even have an opinion on that. So
It's not, but it is
Uh,
I think it's a psychological victory. I think Dr.
Sure.
Watson's got a great point there. Not necessarily that strategic of a place, and but it sends think about the what it sends, because Putin for a long time has been telling his people, we're kicking ass, we're doing great, we're kicking ass, we're doing great. Don't believe what you see on TV. And we
Yeah.
got them on the ropes, and then all of a sudden they just stomp right into Russian territory, and
Mhm.
he can't hide that. So in that way, it's a good one. And Ukraine has done a fantastic job of stopping the missiles coming into Kyiv. So I don't know if they got some sort of iron dome. I would imagine it's shit we've given them.
Yeah.
But before we go further, man, I want to.
I want to, because you brought up a great point about Putin can't hide that, and we've
Mhm.
talked in the past about the start of the Ukraine conflict war. We talked about why Russia was doing this and why now, and
Mhm.
how deeply embedded in the Russian psyche fear of invasion is after centuries of having been invaded, a dozen times.
Yeah.
And now if you want to put it that way, they have invaders inside their country now. Now they didn't, Ukraine didn't just do it on their own as a response to the Russian attack and all those things, but it doesn't change the fact that there's someone other than Russians occupying Russian territory. And I'm wondering, how that might affect the Russian psyche on this. Will it elevate their desire to fight back now? Will this engage the population more? Because before it was kind of right? There's still coffee shops are still full and all that. Will this engage them? I don't know.
I don't know. Well, it remains to be seen. But hundreds of thousands of people that live in that region, Kursk, are running out. As so does that look like refugee camps? I don't know.
Yeah.
But Michael Gentile reminds us that defense contractors remain the only winners in this episode of U.S. Folly Foreign Policy. Yeah,
It's almost like there's a pattern.
it is. Speaking of
It
which,
is. So let's go to you want to talk about Ted's comment here.
yeah, man. The sentencing hearing is it September the 19th. I thought it was a different date in September, but I'm going to take Ted Leonard's word for that one. I mean, my God. Will they let him? Of course, they're going to sentence him to something. Will it be?
Mm-hmm.
I heard word on the street is they're getting Rikers Island ready. Have you heard this?
I have not heard that. No.
Yeah, I guess they've got contractors in there doing some remodeling and restructuring and stuff like that. Just all of a sudden, and the opinion is that it's to accommodate the Secret Service and whatever else is going to have to happen for him to be in there. So if that is true, my God, man, my God, what the hell they're thinking? If they send him into house arrest and an ankle bracelet, I mean, he could stay out on appeal, which would not be without precedent.
Yeah.
So like, hey, look, man, you got 13 months you're going to have to do.
Yep.
But we're going to let you go out on appeal. Then once your appeals are exhausted, and you can go in, serve your time.
Yeah. I just found an article here. It says September 18th for the
September
sentencing date. So,
Okay.
yeah. I see Giles on. Welcome, Guile.
Yeah,
good
Guile.
to see you, brother.
So yeah, that one is something to watch. But wherever you are that day, you need to be watching the television. So
Yep.
Okay. So going back to the Ukraine,
Okay.
this is an interesting one here that came out yesterday, that the Ukrainians are massing troops on the Belarusian border. They've got 120,000 soldiers sitting along the border with Belarus, and it's making Belarus nervous. So they're putting their people down there. Now, it just makes me think, is there a plan for a wider regional conflict, or is that just, I'm going to go into Russia and I'm going to stop Belarus in case they do a surprise attack on us that way? What are your thoughts?
Well, the first refresh my memory. Belarus is aligned with Putin, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but it
Has
all jumbles
potential.
after a while in my head here. So could this also be a propaganda play by Belarus to draw some attention away from Kursk in the media, in the Russian media, in the world attention. I don't know.
I don't either. You know, this is one of those things because Putin did position his some of his nukes, I believe the tactical ones, in Belarus. So they have a means to protect themselves if Zelensky did go in there. But I guess I would have thought that Putin, because I'm pretty sure he said one of his red lines was, I'm gonna pop a nuke if you come into Russian territory. And of course he didn't. So the bluff has been called. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's a line you don't come back from if you pop off a nuke. So, and there would be intense international pressure not to do that, of course. And then it's hard to say. So, what you got on this one here, sir?
On this one, man, it just looking at those destroyed bridges, and the Russians were trying to build pontoon bridges somewhere else down after their strategic bridges were taken out. And it just reminded me that, the Commandant of the Marine Corps came out with his 2030 plan to fight China and other peer adversaries. And they got rid of all of our tanks in the Marine Corps, got rid of our law enforcement battalions and bridging companies. And I'm like, this is absolute insanity. Because guess what? To be able to maneuver forces, you're going to have bridging assets, especially if you look at some of these theaters we're going to fight in. And this shows right here just how important bridges are. If you can't get logistics and tactical forces across those bridges into the territory, then you don't own the territory. You can fly drones over the territory and that's fine. Yeah. But if you can't get people across, it does nobody any good. I mean, we couldn't have done the Thunder Run into Baghdad without our Marine Corps tank battalions. Gulf War I, we couldn't have had that lightning fast 100-hour victory without the tanks. And the law enforcement battalions, how do you think we handle civil unrest? How do you think we handle enemy prisoners of war? You take those war fighters and, like we did in Desert Storm, push the enemy POWs to the rear and let the law enforcement battalions deal with them. And the Commandant of the Marine Corps wiped out all three of those things. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And Tony commented the end of the sniper program. The Marines end their sniper program?
Shut that down.
Seriously.
As a heartbeat. Well, to be more clear on that, every infantry battalion had what they call a STAY platoon, surveillance and target acquisition platoon. And that was a small team of snipers and observers so they could do reconnaissance that the battalion commander could control. Now, as I understand it, they've shut that MOS off and only in the reconnaissance assets. So now the battalion commander doesn't have that asset anymore. And again, it's something that we said the other day. Traditions are there to answer questions that have been forgotten. So if you're not in war anymore, you're like, why do we have these snipers here anyway? It's kind of stupid, isn't it? And we see them. They did this shit after Vietnam. I mean, they were so important in Vietnam. It's like, we don't need them. And here we are again. It doesn't make any sense.
And that brings up, history repeats, right? And I saw that during our Civil War trip. My wife and I looked at each other many times and said, more things change, the more they stay the same. And because humans are involved, and it's all the frailties and greed and all of our other faults as humans play into all of this, right? So, what's Guile say there? I think he's got a unique perspective on that.
Oh, Guile says Putin would not dare. He knows the world will go against him. China, on the other hand, would not care. They will blow up any country that is a hindrance. Yeah, and they're building unsinkable islands so that they only have a couple of aircraft carriers. But why have aircraft carriers? We can just build a freaking island that cannot sink. I mean, it's in some regard a great idea. Alan Kelly says pop a nuke and start World War III. I agree with you, but when you say these red lines, at some point, like, hey man, they just crossed it. Are you prepared to go? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And evidently they weren't. So,
What do you got here?
The riots in the UK, man, it speaks to that idea of poisoned M&Ms. This is insanity what's going on right now. The British government just said that they will not only crack down on British citizens for commenting on the riots in the UK, but American citizens as well. And I was going to play this video. You can actually hear the the chief of the London Metropolitan Police saying that you're not safe in the law. We'll extradite your ass.
So let me see here. I'm trying to think of the right phrase. Oh yeah, come and get some.
I hear you. However, the spinelessness that this administration is, and to
Yeah, true.
to satiate the dystopian nightmare that is the UK right now, perhaps they would allow a couple of citizens to be extradited. I don't know. Of course, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but they're saying this stuff for a reason. Now, where did all these riots come from? We can see those three beautiful young girls that I put up there. They were having a little dance compilation for Taylor Swift songs, and in walks this scumbag I've got here below. Now, this is the picture the media is using of this guy. He's born in Britain from Rwandan parents who came in here during the genocide. So they let some of these poisoned M&Ms in, and then, but this is in reality what he looked like at his arraignment the other day. Of course, I'm not showing his real face now, but that's the best I could get.
Yeah. We've seen that pattern before, right?
Yeah.
With our media here.
So what this led to is, and I think I have some more slides on it. And this is how this whole thing, again, I go back to the word dystopian, because they're making up crazy shit. So right now, the UK, fake claims of a quote Muslim Defense League that fueled the anti-immigration riots. So when this happened, this guy goes in and kills these little girls and stabs dozens of others. Of course, there's no guns, so nobody can stop this clown and stop the killing. Then the rumor goes out that it was someone there on a refugee status, and of course they're like, "No, this is misinformation. This is insane. That this guy was not here." Well, yeah, he was. I mean, he's not. You could say he's British born, but he doesn't think like people that have lived there on the British Isles for thousands of years, and he doesn't comport himself to their rules, as seen by the tragic death of the three young girls. So you have native-born Britons that are just pissed off because the UK law enforcement didn't come out and say, look, he's a Rwandan or someone born of Rwandan parents born here in the UK. So it allowed that information vacuum to just get bigger and bigger and bigger and say, oh, okay, this is a Muslim and you guys are protecting him. So in response to that, those people that showed up pissed off, the claims of there was a Muslim Defense League. So you can see this picture on the left of all these Muslims dressed in black, head to toe with the balaclavas on, took the streets with hammers and knives and were hunting down white native-born Britons. Now, of course, they're telling you this did not happen. This is what this saying is. It's a fake claim. Don't believe what your eyes said. This is not true. But if you read all the way to the bottom of those articles on the BBC, guess what you find out?
What do you find out?
They're not technically Muslim Defense League. They're part of some ghost organization. I'm like, what are we talking about here? Okay, technically, it's like when President Biden said, "There's no such thing as Antifa. That's an idea. It's not an organization." I'm like, really?
Yeah.
So here's what happens once the Muslims come out wearing their all black and running through the streets. And that's why I have and you can go watch all this online. Here's the one on the right is a group of Muslims kicking and beating a man on the ground just for being white in his own country. And of course, then you have the rise of the far right and they're taken to the streets. And so they're on the cusp of civil war. And the way that the British government is handling this is a textbook for how not to handle this. They're putting everybody in prison. They're going to people's homes and arresting them for Facebook posts or just for sharing a Facebook post can get years in prison. So right now the prisons are at full capacity and they've created something, Operation, I'm going to make up the word, but it's like Operation Enduring Freedom. It sounds, that sounds pretty cool. Operation Enduring Freedom. No, what that means is they're holding these people without charges. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
That's a writ of habeas corpus, right? So they're
correct. Yes,
doing that. We're going to hold your ass as long as we need to because our prisons are overcrowded. So now they're going to have to flush the prisons because they're at full capacity. And they said they're talking about reducing sentences for everybody else to to the tune of 40 and 50% to let in all the people that they're arresting now on terrorism charges because they shared a Facebook post. If that's not dystopian, my man, I don't know what else is.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And I'll add on to that. I ran across one that was it was in the UK. It was a woman outside of an abortion clinic, and say what you want about which side of this. Okay, she's outside this abortion clinic, silently praying, being interviewed by a police officer for a crime, for silently praying. Now, as I understand it, the only country in the world with the First Amendment is us.
Mm-hmm.
And that is frightening. She was disturbing no one. You guys can find it on Twitter. I mean, like you say, it's dystopian. So she was being interviewed for a crime for silently standing there.
Mm.
I mean, so basically it's, I mean, if you want to, I mean, I believe in prayer. I know you do, but if you want to look at that from a atheist standpoint, it was the thought police.
Oh, 100%.
So, I mean, yeah, like you say, it's dystopian. Oh, you have the wrong thoughts. We have a camp for you. It's called a re-education camp.
Yeah. And again, like Jeff says, don't laugh. Our government will help them. Yeah. Don't laugh. Hillary Clinton already said it. We talked about it a year or so ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That Trump supporters may need re-education, reprogramming. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say re-education.
Reprogramming, yes. So, and
it is.
Is that death of? It's the equivalent of a death of 1,000 cuts, right? Because it's one little step at a time.
Yeah, and the UK, as we've talked about before, one of the most popular shirts when I've been over there in the last few years has been "Make Orwell Fiction Again."
Yeah,
and I told my wife, I said, it's a surveillance state. She's like, what are you talking about? So when the first time we went to London in recent memory, 2017, and Heathrow, they kind of like, oh, you need to come over here. I'm like, why are kind of we and a few other people getting pulled over here? Well, evidently it's because they didn't have our faces. So they made us look into this thing that was kind of like a 180-degree scanner, and I had to stand there still. And I could see it creating a 3-dimensional holographic model of my face.
Oh my goodness.
And then my wife stepped into this machine-like thing, and they made this hologram of her face and so on. And when you walk down the streets over there, about every 4 to 6 blocks, there's a giant black surveillance van that has these 3-dimensional things on each corner, and it's just scanning faces. And there's this big signs, Metropolitan Police Service, do not cover your face while moving past the van. And you'll see some people scurry past, and it's just like, man, what in the hell? So this is how they're able to very, very quickly round people up with this technology.
Yeah.
Scary.
And we've seen some pushback in previous shows. There's people running around now with battery powered Sawzalls and taking down the new cameras they're putting up in neighborhoods.
Yeah, and they'll charge you with terrorism, buddy, and you'll spend years in prison.
Yep, absolutely. So, and then we tie in the stuff you just hit on today with that. I mean, it's probably just a matter of time till something pops off over there, because people are fed up. People are tired of being controlled. And, if no matter which way the control goes is bad. Right.
Well, Douglas Murray called it, man, with his amazing book, The Strange Death of Europe. If you haven't read it, I mean, it's almost over. You don't even need to read it now. You can see it for your own eyes. But again, he's like, and I'm not disparaging the book anyway, because I think it's fantastic. It's a classic. But his point is it's kind of a numbers problem at some point. It runs away with itself, because if the average native-born Briton, and I don't know another way to say this, native-born white Briton is only replacing the population at 1.1% per couple, it's not enough. And the incoming group is replacing at 3.8%. I'm making numbers up, but it's far and away higher than. And guess what? It's a math problem, and we're about to watch it turn that country upside down. And the people that are still there are pissed off, because for years, going back to the Blair administration, Tony Blair and Cameron and Brown and everyone since then, they have voted for these politicians that said, I'm going to stop it. I'm going to stop this immigration. And none of them have done it. None of them. None, ours haven't either. So
So I see Alan Kelly's got I agree with this sentiment here. He says he's too damn old to be reprogrammed. Guess they'll delete me. So
Yeah.
yeah, and unfortunately, that's where dystopian things lead, right?
Exactly. So what's this quote tell us here as our final?
This is from James Clear. He's I don't know, business motivational guy, and I really like what he says here. He says if you do not like your results in a particular area, it is rarely your intellect that deserves the blame, but rather where you direct your intellect. Results are purchased by how you spend your attention.
I like that.
Yeah. So spend your attention wisely, ladies and gentlemen, because
Yeah, because
that's what you'll get.
we only have so much bandwidth.
That's it.
And so what do we do here? You know, we give this kind of gloom and doom on Mondays, but really what can you do? Well, if you know that prices are only going one way, especially like we talked about beef and some of these other staples, you know, if you don't want to just live on ramen and rat meat, okay,
Yeah.
you probably need to invest in some deep freezers like we have and you have
Yep.
and many people that are watching today have, and go ahead and put some of that beef in. Buy it now while it's, you know, $6 a pound before it becomes $13 a pound here in next year or whenever. I mean, again, math problem, guys. You know, so if you could eat cheap beef next year if you buy it today. Get it while you can. Stock up. Find some room in your house. Dedicate one closet to it if you don't have a dedicated pantry. But that's something you can do. Have some cash on hand. I mean, these are some simple things. Yesterday, I'd walked around the barn and I noticed I had one stall that was not quite full of wood, and that stall is kind of like my next year wood. You know, I'm getting wood for the winter of 2025 and stuff like that. So in 2026, so I called my wood guy. I'm like, hey man, I need a couple more cord of wood down here. Okay, delivered it yesterday, stacked it up, paid him in cash now, because guess what? That wood's going to cost me a year from now.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, and that's the kind of forward thinking that we both advocate for. You know, I do it from the news and economic side on Mondays. And, you know, we can look at these things and make some decent predictions about what's coming. Right. And you're talking about, you know, a different facet of thinking ahead that I agree with, and we practice here at our household, but it all dovetails together. Right. It's all one. Each one of these is one piece of the puzzle. And where I think prepping has gotten a bad name is your traditional prepper. It's only one area, right? Beans, bullets, and band-aids, right? Well, there's other things too. I mean, so let's go back to, I don't know, maybe the GFC 2009. There were people, and I bent more that way at that time, who thought the whole world was going to fall apart and all I need is gold and bullets and so on and so forth, right? Well, the world didn't fall apart. They found a way to get things to continue on through massive deficit spending, right? So we need to be more well-rounded, in my opinion.
It's really, it's sticking a finger in the dike. I mean, if you allow and this, I again go back to Kensington School of Economics, which says government intervention, it can forestall or stop recessions and things of this nature. Yeah, it can, but at the same time, you just remove moral hazard from the equation. And when you do that, you know, then good luck with it long term.
You're just going to get more of it, right?
Yes,
You're going to get more carry. You're going to get more carry trades going on because at the end of it, somebody's going to bail you out. And that goes back to somewhere shows ago, Andrew Jackson. I just toured his house at the Hermitage, and he was talking about, either the first or second U.S. bank. It was their first or second attempt to make a central bank. And he said, you are a bunch of vipers and thieves who take the profit and then put the losses off on the citizens. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
That's exactly right.
So,
well, I mean, I think that's probably enough info for everybody today.
We're coming up on 90 minutes of happiness and joy.
I know, right? And if you want to check out some of this awesome swag that me and Will are wearing, you can do that by clicking the links in today's show notes, or just going to AmericanWarriorSociety.com and go to the shop that Mike has put together. Got some great stuff for you over there. And that's all I got. Will, you want to take us out?
Yeah, sounds great. The fight's coming. Be ready.